I can't believe this is happening, Hannah Miller whispered under her breath, gripping the frayed straps of her worn canvas tote bag as she stood frozen in the checkout line at Westfield Market. Ella squirmed against her chest, wrapped in a faded pink blanket that had been washed so many times the edges had gone thin. The baby made a soft, hungry sound, not quite a cry yet, but close enough to make Hannah's body tighten with panic. The fluorescent lights above the registers flickered with a faint buzzing sound. It made the whole store feel harsher than it already was. Every reflection on the polished tile seemed too bright. Every face behind her felt too close. On the counter sat the things she had spent nearly 40 minutes choosing and rechoosing: one small pack of diapers instead of the larger one, 2 cans of formula instead of 3, wipes, baby fever drops, a loaf of store-brand bread, and a carton of eggs she had almost put back twice. The cashier looked at the screen, then at Hannah. "You're $4.16 short," she said. Hannah swallowed. "I know. She dug into her purse again, though she already knew there was nothing left. "I thought I had enough." Behind her, someone sighed. Not loudly. That would have been easier. It was the quiet kind of sigh that made shame crawl up the back of her neck. She opened the small coin pouch with trembling fingers and tipped the contents into her palm. 3 quarters. 2 dimes. A nickel. A penny stuck to the inside seam with lint. Ella whimpered again. "I can take off the eggs," Hannah said quickly. The cashier's mouth tightened. "You're still short." Then the wipes. The cashier tapped the screen. "Still short." Hannah stared at the items like they were accusing her. Formula. Diapers. Medicine. There was no luxury there. Nothing unnecessary. Nothing chosen for comfort. Her rent was 9 days late. Her phone bill had been extended twice. That morning, the daycare had called to remind her that Ella could not return next week unless the balance was paid. Hannah had nodded through the call as if the woman could see her, standing in her apartment kitchen in socks with holes in both heels. Cold coffee untouched beside a stack of envelopes she no longer opened immediately because knowing the exact number did not make it easier to breathe. She had lost her part-time accounting job 2 months ago when the firm downsized after losing a corporate contract. Since then, she had taken anything that came: evening inventory shifts, freelance bookkeeping for a bakery that paid late, weekend filing at a tax office where the heater barely worked. Every dollar had already been assigned before it reached her hand. Still, somehow, she was always behind. "Ma'am," the cashier said, lower now but colder. "We can't process the transaction without full payment." "I understand," Hannah said. Her voice sounded too calm. That scared her more than crying would have. She reached for the formula. "I'll put one back." Ella began to cry then, a thin, exhausted cry that cut through the mechanical beeping of the registers. A woman behind Hannah muttered, "Some people shouldn't have kids if they can't afford them." The words landed softly but deeply. Hannah froze. For 1 second, she was not in Westfield Market. She was back in a hospital hallway 11 months earlier, signing forms with one hand while holding her phone with the other, listening to Ella's father say, "I can't do this, Hannah. I'm sorry." He had not come back. Not to the hospital. Not to the apartment. Not to the life they had planned before fear became bigger than love. Hannah blinked hard and pulled the formula can closer. "I'll put this one back," she said again, quieter. That was when a man's voice spoke from somewhere to her right. "Don't." The word was calm. Not loud. But it carried. Hannah turned. A tall man in a dark overcoat stood near the end of the register lane. His suit beneath it was expensive in the quiet way rich people wore things without needing logos. His hair was dark, neatly combed back, and his face held the kind of controlled stillness that made people instinctively move around him. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Steel gray. Observant. Tired in a way she did not expect. He looked at the counter, then at Ella, then at Hannah's hand still gripping the formula can. "I'll cover the difference," he said. Hannah's face burned. "No. That's not necessary." "It's $4, he said gently. "That doesn't make it less humiliating." The cashier looked away. For the first time, something in the man's expression shifted. Not pity. Something more complicated. Recognition, maybe. He removed his wallet and placed a $20 bill on the counter. "Please process the full order." Hannah's throat tightened. "I said no." "And I heard you," he replied. "I'm not trying to make a point. I'm trying to stop a baby from going without formula because a room full of adults decided to watch." The line went silent. Hannah stared at him, anger and gratitude tangling so tightly she could not separate them. The cashier took the bill. Hannah wanted to object again. She wanted to protect the last small piece of dignity she still had. But Ella's cry had turned hoarse, and the formula was on the counter, and pride did not feed a child. So she said nothing. The transaction completed with a beep that felt too final. The cashier handed Hannah the receipt without meeting her eyes. Hannah packed the bags herself because she needed something to do with her hands. The man did not reach for them. He did not crowd her. He stepped back and let her gather what remained of herself in silence. Only when she lifted the last bag did he speak again. "My name is Logan Pierce." Hannah looked at him. "Hannah Miller," she said before she could stop herself. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Miller," he repeated. It was so slight that anyone else might have missed it. But Hannah had learned to notice things. Landlords' pauses. Employers' hesitations. Doctors' careful tones before bad news. "You know me?" she asked. "No," he said after half a beat. "I know the name." That was not the same thing. But Ella cried again, and Hannah was too tired to chase the lie. "Thank you," she said. "For the groceries." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes," she said, lifting her chin. "I do. Because I can't afford not to be polite." The word surprised both of them. Logan's jaw tightened slightly, not with anger, but with the impact of being struck somewhere true. Hannah turned and walked toward the exit before he could respond. Outside, the cold hit her like a slap. The winter air rushed beneath her coat, sharp and damp. Snow had melted into dirty slush along the curb, and headlights smeared across wet pavement. Hannah shifted Ella higher against her shoulder and adjusted the grocery bags digging into her fingers. She had planned to take a cab home because Ella had been feverish earlier, but after the checkout line, cab fare was impossible. The bus stop was 7 blocks away. The walk from the bus stop to her apartment was another 6. She calculated it automatically, 19 minutes walking if she moved fast, 30 if Ella cried, longer if the bags tore. Survival was mostly math. She stepped carefully around a patch of ice, her breath turning white in front of her. "Hannah." She stopped. The black SUV at the curb was so clean it looked out of place in the salted street. The rear window lowered, and Logan Pierce leaned slightly toward the opening. "Let me drive you home." "No," the answer came fast. He did not seem surprised. "I understand why you'd say that. You don't understand anything about me." "That may be true." She shifted the bags again. One handle cut deeper into her palm. Logan got out of the SUV, closing the door softly behind him. He stayed several feet away. "You have a baby, 3 heavy bags, and it's below freezing. And you're a stranger." "Yes. At least we agree on something." A faint breath left him. It might have been almost a laugh, but it didn't reach his face. "I can call a cab and pay the driver directly. You don't have to get into my car." Hannah looked at him, suspicious despite herself. "Why?" He did not answer quickly. That made her more uneasy. Because I saw something I should not have ignored, he said at last. That sounds practiced. It isn't. Ella whimpered into Hannah's coat. Hannah looked down at her daughter's flushed cheeks. The fever drops in the bag suddenly felt heavier than everything else. She hated that need could make a person negotiate with fear. I'll take the cab, she said. Not your car. Logan nodded once and took out his phone. While he called, Hannah stood under the market awning with snowmelt dripping steadily from the edge above her. Her fingers ached from the cold. Ella's breathing was warm and uneven against her neck. Logan gave the cab company the address Hannah reluctantly provided. When he repeated it, his voice changed again. Just slightly. She noticed. You really do know my name, she said after he ended the call. He looked at her. I know the building. Why? My company owns part of the development 2 blocks over. Of course it did. Hannah almost laughed. The city was full of invisible strings tied to men like him. You could be evicted, hired, fired, denied, approved, moved, priced out, and never know whose hand had tugged the knot. The cab arrived 11 minutes later. Logan paid the driver in advance and opened the rear door, but Hannah climbed in without taking his hand. Before she closed the door, he said, "May I make sure you get inside safely?" No, he accepted that too. But as the cab pulled away, Hannah saw his SUV follow at a distance. Not close enough to threaten. Close enough to keep watch. She should have been angry. She was. But beneath it, shamefully, was relief. The apartment building looked worse at night. The brick facade was stained by years of weather. One porch light flickered above the entrance. Someone had left a broken umbrella near the steps, its metal ribs bent like fingers. Inside the lobby, the radiator hissed angrily, and the air smelled faintly of old mail, bleach, and damp coats. Hannah paid nothing when she got out. The driver only nodded. Logan's SUV stopped behind the cab. She ignored it and carried Ella and the bags inside. The elevator was out again. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Service request submitted." No date. Hannah stood there for a second, staring at it. Then she laughed once. A tiny broken sound. Of course. She shifted Ella, lifted the bags, and started up the stairs. By the 2nd floor, her arms burned. By the 3rd, Ella was crying again. By the 4th, the paper bag with the bread split at the bottom. The loaf tumbled onto the stairwell landing. Hannah closed her eyes. Behind her, footsteps. "I'm not asking to come in," Logan said quietly. "But let me carry the bags." She wanted to say no. She wanted to tell him she had done harder things than stairs. But Ella's crying had turned breathless, and Hannah's shoulder throbbed from the weight. "Only the bags," she said. "Only the bags." He picked them up without comment, including the fallen bread. He did not look around the stairwell with disgust. He did not ask why the elevator was broken. He simply followed her up 2 more flights at a respectful distance. At her door, Hannah fumbled for her keys. The late rent notice was still taped beneath the peephole in a bright orange envelope. Logan saw it. She hated him for seeing it. She ripped it down and shoved it under her arm. "It's not what it looks like," she said automatically. Then she almost laughed again, because it was exactly what it looked like. Logan said nothing. That silence, somehow, was kinder than reassurance. Inside, the apartment was small but clean. Not pretty, exactly. Carefully kept. A thrifted couch with 1 sagging cushion. A kitchen table with 2 mismatched chairs. A drying rack near the heater with baby clothes arranged by size. A stack of bills face down beside a mug of cold coffee. The overhead light hummed faintly. Hannah set Ella in the crib near the bedroom doorway and touched her forehead. Still warm. Too warm. Logan placed the bags on the kitchen counter and stepped back. I'll go, he said. Hannah should have let him. Instead, Ella coughed. It was a small cough. But it had a wet edge to it that made Hannah's stomach drop. She lifted the baby again and listened to her breathing. Has she seen a doctor? Logan asked. Hannah's body stiffened. Yes. The lie came out too quickly. He noticed. She turned on him. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like you're deciding what kind of mother I am. His face changed. I'm not. Everyone is. Ella coughed again. Hannah's anger faltered. She grabbed the fever drops, then stopped. The dosage chart was worn from being folded and unfolded. Ella's weight had changed since the last pediatric visit. Hannah stared at the tiny printed numbers until they blurred. Logan's voice was quiet. When did the fever start? This morning. How high? I don't know. The thermometer battery died. He inhaled slowly. Not judgment. Control. Hannah. No, I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was going to ask if I can call a pediatric urgent care. She looked at him. The practical offer disarmed her more than comfort would have. I don't have insurance active right now, she said, each word costing her something. There was a paperwork issue after I lost my job. They said I missed the deadline. I filed the appeal. It's pending. Logan's eyes lowered for 1 second. Not to the floor. To the bills. Then back to Ella. I'll pay. No, Hannah, no. You don't get to walk in here and become the answer to everything because you have money. The room went still. Ella fussed against her. Logan accepted the hit. But this time, he did not retreat completely. You're right, he said. I don't. That stopped her. I can't fix your life, he continued. And I shouldn't pretend I can. But a baby with a fever needs care tonight. Let that be the only decision. Hannah looked down at Ella. Her daughter's lashes fluttered. Her cheeks were flushed. Her little hand opened and closed weakly against Hannah's sweater. There were moments in motherhood when pride became dangerous. Hannah hated those moments most. Call them, she whispered. The urgent care lobby smelled like disinfectant, wet wool, and vending machine coffee. A television mounted in the corner played a home renovation show with the volume too low to hear. A little boy coughed into his sleeve. A tired woman in scrubs called names from behind a glass window. Hannah filled out forms with Ella asleep against her chest. Employer, none. Insurance, pending. Emergency contact, she paused their longest. Logan sat 2 chairs away, not beside her. He had learned quickly. Or maybe he had always been observant. When the receptionist asked for payment before the visit, Hannah's pen stopped moving. Logan stood. Hannah did not look at him. She heard the quiet exchange. The card sliding. The receipt printing. The shame came anyway, hot and familiar. In the exam room, the nurse weighed Ella and took her temperature. 101.8, she said. Not terrible, but we'll check her lungs. Hannah nodded. Too many times. The doctor was kind but rushed. Viral infection, possible early ear infection, monitor breathing, fluids, fever reducer, follow-up if symptoms worsened. A prescription was sent to a pharmacy that stayed open late. Hannah listened carefully, asking questions, repeating instructions, writing notes on the back of the grocery receipt because she had forgotten her notebook. Logan watched from near the door. Not Hannah. Ella. At one point, the doctor asked, "Father?" The word cracked the air. Hannah said, "No." Logan said nothing. But something closed in his face. Outside the exam room, while Hannah adjusted Ella's hat, Logan took a call. He turned slightly away, but the hallway was narrow. "I don't care what the report says," he said in a low voice. "Find out why the Child Care Reimbursement Fund was frozen after the merger. And pull the layoff list from Alden and Rowe Accounting." Hannah's hand stilled. Alden and Rowe. Her former employer. She looked at him. Logan ended the call slowly. "What did you just say?" His silence answered first. Hannah stepped back. "No, Hannah, no. Why did you say Alden and Rowe?" He looked tired now. Not polished. Not powerful. Just tired. "My company acquired the parent group that held their largest account." Her heartbeat began to pound. "What does that mean?" "It means the restructuring affected their contracts." "My job," she said. He didn't deny it. The hallway seemed to tilt. "You knew," she whispered. "At the store. When I said my name, you knew." "I suspected. And you followed me home?" "I wanted to make sure the baby was safe." "No. Don't do that." Her voice shook. "Don't hide behind my baby." He flinched. "Good." Hannah held Ella closer. "I stood in that grocery store counting coins because of a decision made by men in rooms I will never enter." Logan's face tightened. "Yes. The honesty hurt worse. My daycare assistants disappeared because my employment status changed. My insurance got tangled because HR sent the wrong termination date. My rent is late because severance was delayed and then reduced. And you," she stopped, breath shaking. "You bought formula like you were rescuing me." "I didn't know the full situation. But you knew enough." A nurse passed behind them, pretending not to hear. Logan lowered his voice. "You're right." Hannah laughed bitterly. "That must be convenient. Saying that. It isn't. For me, it's not a sentence. It's my life." He looked at her then, and the grief in his eyes was real enough to confuse her. "I signed the approval," he said. "I didn't review every impact. I told myself that was impossible at scale. That people would be handled by process. Packages. Support systems." His jaw tightened. "I was wrong." Hannah stared at him. There it was. Not a villain. Something worse. A man who had not meant to hurt her and had hurt her anyway. That was how most damage happened. "I don't want your guilt," she said. "I know." "No, you don't. Because guilt still centers you. It lets you feel like the wounded one." The word struck him hard. For a moment, he looked almost unsteady. Then Ella coughed against Hannah's shoulder, and the fight drained out of the room. Hannah closed her eyes. "I need to get her medicine." "I'll drive you." "No, Hannah," I said no. This time, he did not argue. He called a cab. At the pharmacy, the prescription cost $37.80. Hannah had $12. She stood at the counter while the pharmacist waited, kind enough to look uncomfortable. Logan stood near the greeting cards, far enough away to give her the illusion of privacy. Hannah looked at the medication. Then at Ella. Then at the card reader. There was no dignity in refusing medicine for a child. She turned without looking directly at him. "I'll pay you back." Logan approached slowly. "You don't have to. I will pay you back." He nodded. "Okay." That single word made it possible to accept. Back at the apartment, it was past midnight. The building was quieter now, though somewhere below, a couple argued through thin walls. A pipe knocked behind the radiator. Outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. Hannah gave Ella the medicine, changed her diaper, and rocked her until the baby's breathing settled into a steadier rhythm. Logan stood by the door with his coat over one arm. He looked too large for the room. Too expensive. Too connected to everything Hannah feared. And yet, he had sat in an urgent care lobby for 3 hours without once checking his watch. "I should go," he said. "Yes," Hannah replied. But neither moved. Finally, she said, "Why did you ask about the childcare fund?" He looked at the floor, then back at her. "Because it should not have been frozen." "Was it?" "Yes." "By you?" "By a department under me." "That's not an answer." His mouth pressed into a line. "I approved the merger timeline that caused it." Hannah nodded slowly. There it was again. Distance disguised as structure. "Do you have children?" she asked. The question seemed to pass through him. No, something in his tone made her regret asking, though she did not know why. He looked toward Ella's crib. "I had a younger sister," he said. "Mara. She had a little boy." Hannah waited. "She called me the night he got sick. I was in London closing a deal. I told her to take him to the hospital and said I'd call in the morning." His voice remained even, but barely. "There wasn't a morning." Logan shook his head. Hannah's anger faltered, not gone, but forced to share space with something else. "He was 6 months old," Logan said. "Respiratory infection. It moved fast. Mara never forgave me. She died 2 years later. Pills. Wine. Grief." The official words were accidental. The apartment felt very quiet. "I'm sorry," Hannah said despite herself. Logan looked at her with painful honesty. "I don't tell you that to earn forgiveness. I'm telling you because when I heard Ella cough, I stopped seeing clearly. That doesn't make you safe. I know. And it doesn't erase what your company did." No, Hannah respected him more for not trying to soften it. She sat down slowly on the couch, exhaustion finally pulling at her bones. Ella slept in the crib, one tiny fist near her face. "I don't know what to do with you," Hannah said. Logan gave a humorless breath. "That makes 2 of us." For the first time all night, something like fragile truth stood between them. Not romance. Not trust. Truth. "I can assign someone to review your employment file," he said. "Not as charity. If policies were mishandled, they need to be corrected. And if they weren't, then I still need to know what the policies are doing to people." Hannah looked at him sharply. "People like me?" "Yes. I'm not a case study." "No. You're not." She wanted to believe he understood that. She didn't yet. "Give me your card," she said. He blinked. "My card?" "Yes. Not your driver. Not your assistant. Yours. If I decide to contact you, I will. If I don't, you leave me alone." He reached into his coat and handed her a simple black card. Logan Pierce. CEO, Pierce Holdings. The letters looked heavy in her hand. She placed it on the table, not in her purse. "I'll pay back the urgent care and medicine," she said. "You can send it in installments." "I didn't ask permission." A faint, weary smile touched his mouth. "No. You didn't." At the door, he paused. "Hannah." She looked up. "You were right." In the hallway. "About what?" "Guilt can be selfish." The word stayed after he left. Hannah locked the door, then checked it twice. She stood in the dim apartment, listening to Ella breathe, the city humming beyond the glass, the black card lying on the table beside the overdue rent notice. She did not feel rescued. She felt shaken. But for the first time in months, someone powerful had been forced to look directly at the wreckage his world had helped create. And he had not looked away. Morning came gray and wet. Hannah woke on the couch with a stiff neck and the taste of old fear in her mouth. Ella's fever had lowered, but she was still fussy, clinging to Hannah's sweater with both hands. The apartment smelled like baby lotion, cold tea, and radiator dust. At 8:13 a.m., daycare called. Hannah let it go to voicemail. At 8:22, the landlord texted, "Rent must be received by Friday to avoid filing." She stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then she looked at Logan's card. No. She made oatmeal with water because milk needed to last for Ella. She folded laundry. She updated her job spreadsheet. She emailed 3 places about bookkeeping work. She called the insurance office and waited 47 minutes before being told her appeal was still under review. At noon, while Ella napped, Hannah finally called Alden and Rowe. The HR line transferred her 4 times. By the end, she had learned exactly nothing. At 2:06 p.m., she picked up Logan's card. Her thumb hovered over the number. She hated that dialing felt like surrender. He answered on the second ring. Logan Pierce. It's Hannah Miller. Silence. Then, how is Ella? Better. I'm glad. I'm not calling for comfort. I didn't assume you were. That irritated her because he probably hadn't. I want my employment file reviewed. Severance, termination date, benefits transition, daycare reimbursement, everything. And I want written results. You'll have them. I'm not signing anything. I won't ask you to. And I don't want your PR department anywhere near me. A pause. Understood. She heard voices in the background, then a door closing. Hannah, he said, quieter, I also need to tell you something before you hear it from anyone else. Her stomach tightened. What? The executive board is meeting this afternoon. The merger fallout is worse than I knew. It's not just you. Congratulations on discovering consequences. He absorbed it. Yes. The silence stretched. Then he said, I'd like to establish an emergency relief review for affected workers. Hannah almost hung up. Don't name it after me. I wasn't going to. Don't use my story. I won't. Don't turn people's suffering into a redemption arc. His breathing changed. I deserve that. I'm not giving it to you because you deserve it. I'm giving it because you need to hear it. Another pause. Then, softly, I do. That was the problem with him. He listened. Not perfectly. Not harmlessly. But he listened in a way that made anger harder to keep clean. Over the next week, Logan did not appear at her door. That mattered. Instead, a woman named Priya from Pierce Holdings' ethics office contacted Hannah with formal documentation. She was careful, professional, and did not ask Hannah to be grateful. The review found errors. Her termination date had been entered incorrectly. Her severance had been reduced under a clause that did not apply to part-time employees with dependent care benefits. Her child care reimbursement had been suspended before the required transition window. Her health coverage paperwork had been delayed by an outsourced HR vendor. Hannah read the email 3 times. Then she sat on the kitchen floor and cried silently while Ella played with a plastic measuring cup beside her. The money would not make everything fine. But it would stop the immediate bleeding. Back pay. Corrected severance. Reinstated transition benefits. Emergency daycare coverage for 60 days. Real things. Not flowers. Not pretty words. Real things. Logan called that evening. I received the report, he said. So did I. I'm sorry. Hannah leaned against the counter, looking at the repaired numbers on the page. You should be. I am. That still doesn't fix all of it. No, she appreciated the no more than the apology. Did you know before the market? She asked. No. I knew the merger caused layoffs. I did not know the benefit failures. But you didn't check. No, that answer sat between them. Then Hannah said, what happens to the other people? We're auditing every affected file. And if it costs your company? It will. Will your board allow that? They may try not to. And? A quiet steel entered his voice. Then they'll have to try harder than I do. For the first time, Hannah almost smiled. Almost. Trust did not arrive like light breaking through clouds. It came in small, suspicious pieces. A corrected deposit. A daycare balance paid through the benefits fund, not Logan's personal account. A pharmacy reimbursement form that actually worked. A landlord email saying the filing had been paused because partial rent had been received. Hannah still took freelance jobs. She still counted money. She still woke at night to check Ella's breathing. She still distrusted good news until it cleared the bank. But the cliff beneath her feet was no longer crumbling quite as fast. 2 weeks later, Logan asked if he could meet her in a public place. She chose a diner near her apartment because the booths were cracked, the coffee was cheap, and no one there cared who he was. He arrived without a driver, wearing a dark sweater instead of a suit. He still looked expensive. Hannah brought Ella because childcare was not something she wasted. They sat across from each other while rain streaked the window. Ella slapped one hand against the table and laughed at the sugar packets. Logan watched her with an expression so raw Hannah looked away. You're uncomfortable around babies, she said. Yes. But you keep looking at her. Yes. Why? He took a long breath. Because I'm trying not to look away just because it hurts. Hannah stirred her coffee though she had not added sugar. That's the first honest thing you've said that didn't sound like a bored statement. His mouth shifted. I'll take that as progress. Don't get ambitious. The almost smile came again, this time staying a second longer. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and ignored the call. Bored? She asked. Yes. They angry? Very. Good. He nodded. Yes. Hannah studied him. You could have buried the audit. I could have. Why didn't you? He looked out at the rain. Because you were right. I wanted to be a good man without doing the costly parts. That landed quietly. Hannah looked down at Ella, who was trying to chew the edge of a napkin. Being good usually costs someone something, she said. I'm learning that. Late. Yes. Their eyes met. There was attraction there, but it was not simple. It did not erase anger. It did not excuse harm. It existed beside all the difficult things, which made it more dangerous and more real. I'm not your healing project, Hannah said. No, and you're not my solution. I know. Do you? He leaned back slightly. I'm trying to. That was not perfect. But it was believable. A month passed. Ella recovered. Hannah found a 3-day-a-week bookkeeping position with a nonprofit clinic. It paid less than Alden and Rowe, but the manager spoke to her like a person and let her adjust hours around daycare. Pierce Holdings completed the benefits audit. Some employees received payments. Some received apologies. Some received both. A few filed legal claims anyway. Hannah was glad. Accountability should not depend on politeness. Logan came by only when invited. Sometimes he brought documents for Hannah to review because she had agreed, against her own expectations, to sit on a worker impact advisory panel. Pierce Holdings was forming under public pressure and private necessity. She told him the name was terrible. He changed it. They argued often. About language. About power. About whether corporate apologies meant anything if no one lost a bonus. About whether intentions mattered after harm had already happened. Sometimes Logan became defensive. Sometimes Hannah became unfair. Sometimes they sat in silence afterward, both too proud to apologize quickly. But they came back. That mattered. One evening, after a long meeting at the community center, Hannah found Logan standing outside in the cold, his coat open, staring at nothing. "You look like someone died," she said. He gave a small, bleak laugh. "My board chair resigned." "Is that bad?" "For the company." "Temporarily." "For you." He looked at her. "I don't know who I am without winning." The honesty was so quiet she almost missed it. Hannah shifted Ella on her hip. "Maybe someone who has to learn other skills." He looked at Ella, then back at Hannah. "That sounds unpleasant." "It is." He smiled then. A real one, tired but human. Hannah felt something loosen in her chest and immediately distrusted it. "Don't do that," she said. "What?" "Look redeemable." "It's confusing." The smile faded into something softer. "I'm not asking you to forgive me." "I know." But she was beginning to. Not all at once. Not cleanly. Not because he had suffered too. Because he kept showing up differently. And because she, too, was tired of letting pain decide every door stayed locked forever. Spring arrived slowly. Snow turned to dirty water along the curbs. The broken elevator was finally repaired after tenants organized and threatened legal action with help from the clinic where Hannah worked. The first time it carried her and Ella to the 6th floor without forcing her up the stairs, Hannah cried in the corner where no one could see. On a Sunday afternoon, Logan visited with a stack of paperwork and no gifts. That had been one of her rules. No surprise gifts. No expensive gestures. No rescuing disguised as romance. He respected it. Ella, however, had no such boundaries. She crawled toward him with determined little grunts and pulled herself up against his trouser leg. Logan froze. Hannah watched from the kitchen. "You can pick her up," she said. He looked genuinely alarmed. "She's very small." "She's a baby, Logan." "I'm aware." Hannah laughed before she could stop herself. The sound surprised both of them. Carefully, awkwardly, he lifted Ella. She grabbed his collar and babbled with complete authority. Something broke across his face. Not dramatically. Quietly. Grief passing through tenderness. Hannah looked away to give him privacy. When she turned back, his eyes were damp but steady. "She trusts easily," he said. "She's a baby. I do the suspicious part for both of us. I've noticed." Ella patted his cheek. He closed his eyes for half a second. Hannah felt the room shift. Not into fantasy. Into possibility. Later, after Ella fell asleep, they stood by the window while rain tapped softly against the glass. The city below was still hard. Rent was still high. Jobs were still fragile. Grief still lived in both of them. Nothing had magically transformed. But Hannah's apartment no longer felt like a place where she was waiting for the next disaster alone. Logan looked at the stack of bills on the table, then at the repaired elevator notice magnet to the fridge, then at Hannah. "I need to tell you something," he said. Her body tensed automatically. He noticed. "I'm not leaving because you tensed," he said. "But I'll say it carefully." She nodded once. "I'm stepping back from part of the company." Hannah blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll remain CEO for now, but the board approved restructuring with independent oversight. I'm giving up discretionary control over worker transition policies." That sounds like it hurt. It did. Good. He smiled faintly. "Yes." She folded her arms. "Why are you telling me?" "Because a few months ago, I would have seen that as weakness. Now I think it may be the first responsible thing I've done in years. Hannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, responsibility is not the same.